Kalkalosh, Boker Or, Bekiim Halacha 6, day 30, Siman Kuf Samechet 158, page 79, Halacha Lamed. ינגב ידיו היטב קודם שיבצע, שהאוכל בלי ניגוב ידיים כאילו אוכל לחם טמא. So this is the halacha that we mentioned yesterday. It's a Siman Kuf Nunche Sif Yudbet where it talks about, right, that if a person's going to come and he has to dry his hands, but if he's going to eat without drying his hands, he's ki'ilu eating ochel tameh. Says the footnote, right, 26. He says, the Gemara Masechet Sotah says that Rabbi Avhu taught this halacha based upon a pasuk. The pasuk says in Yecheskel, HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes and he says, this is how the people of Yisrael will eat their impure bread. So the Maharsha's explanation for the connection between the pasuk and the halacha, Rav Yaakov of the Balaturin come and he pointed out that the Hebrew words lechem tameh, right, lachmam tameh, have the same numerical value, right, of 168 as the words belin niguv yadayim. So it's the same gematria. Remember, the Balaturim was also always big in gematriot. So now the question is, why did our sages insist on drying their hands? What's so important? You know, if you didn't dry your hands, it's kilu ochel lechem tameh. What's going on? So Rashi explained that Yavuz Halacha wrote that if someone eats with wet fingers, it makes the bread unappetizing to many people as if it was defiled with tum'ah. Meaning, what we mentioned yesterday, people look at it, it's like, it's all wet, they don't like it. Rav Menachem HaMeiri, right, he wrote likewise. Rabbi Yonah's disciples and Rabbeinu Hananel, they explain that when someone eats bread with wet fingers, the water defiles the bread, making it susceptible to become tum'ah. Right, tameh basically. But Moshe Feinstein explained the practical difference between these two explanations. Right, fine. Next halacha. נכון להחמיר שינגב ידיו, אף כששפך על כל יד רביעית מים, או יטבילם בנהר או במקווה. You remember yesterday we said that 1 second, but now if you already did, right, the revi'it, so now there's no lechem tameh. So there's no lechem tameh, you don't have to dry it. But he still says it's still proper to be machmir, to dry the hands, even if you're going to come and you're going to pour a revi'it of water, or he put his hands into a nahar or a mikveh. וכן הוא מנהג העולם להחמיר, שאפילו אם שפכו על הידיים רביעית, אין אוכלים בלא ניגוב ידיים. You're still not going to eat without niguv yadayim. So he comes and he says, right, as follows, right, number 27. Maran and the Shulchan Aruch ruled that if someone poured a revi'it of water on each hand, or if someone poured a revi'it of water on both hands at once, it is unnecessary to dry the hands before eating the bread. He added, so this is Shulchan Aruch Mefuras, so it's Kuf Samechet Sif Yud Gimel. If you have a revi'it, you don't have to dry the hands. However, he added that the same applies if someone immersed his hands into a river, to a nahar or a mikveh. And the Bet Yosef, he brings out Mordechai in Sefer Mitzvot Gadol, the Samag, ruling that someone who immerses his hands in a mikveh does not have to dry them afterwards. And he explained that this is because the water on the hands never become tameh at all. When pouring a revi'it of water on the hands at once, the water likewise does not become tmeim, and therefore it is unnecessary to dry them. The Yam Shel Shlomo Luria and the Beit Chadash, however, ruled that although this is true for someone who immerses his hands in a mikveh, someone who just poured his hands right out of revi'it, right, should still dry them. So again, the Marshal comes and he says that no, in a mikveh or in a nahar, you're right. But a revi'it, you still have to dry the hands. Abiyur Halacha pointed out that this definitely is according to Rabbeinu Hananel's explanation of the halacha. The Levush ruled even more stringently, requiring drying the hands even when immersing in a mikveh. So the Levush went to the mamash extreme. So even in a mikveh, you would still have to dry your hands. He argued that regardless of how well performed Netillat Yadayim, it still appears unappetizing to eat with the wet hands. So again, obviously he was going like the first explanation, that it was because it's unappetizing and nothing to do with the fact that you're making it now susceptible for tumah. The Kaf HaChaim Sofer, one second. The Kaf HaChaim Sofer testified that the common custom is to dry the hands in all cases. So therefore, halakha l'maaseh, what are we doing? We always dry the hands. That's the custom. As explained above in the footnote to Halacha 25, since our custom is to say a bracha after washing and before drying, so therefore it must be that we rely on the opinion that even in such a case, it's still necessary to dry the hands. So that's what we answered yesterday. Yesterday, you remember somebody asked, 1 second, but if right now I poured a revi'it on my hands, so now technically I finished a mitzvah. If I already finished a mitzvah and I made a bracha, I don't need to dry my hands anymore. So therefore I can answer whatever I want. And the answer is no. The fact that we still make the bracha, even in that case, and we're still doing it in such a case, it means that we still believe that you still have to dry the hands. To justify this practice, it's important that we observe this stringency. Okay? The hands. Halacha Lamed Bet. Halacha Lamed Bet comes and it says like this, page 80. מותר לנגב הידיים ממכשיר לייבוש ידיים הפועל על ידי הזרמת אוויר על גבי הידיים, והוא בניגוב ידיים על ידי השמש וכדומה. So basically, the concept of the drying of the hands, it doesn't matter how you want to dry your hands. You could dry your hands with whatever way you want. It could be the hand drying device, right? A blow dryer, right? Of hot air. It could be paper towel. It could be a towel. It could be with the sun. It could be any way you like. you could come and you're going to dry the hands. Look in number 28. Whether the reason for the rule forbidding one to eat, right, until drying the hands, as Rashi explained, right, or as the explanation of Rabbi Yonah and Rabbi Hananel, that means it doesn't matter what's the reason, whether it's going to be that you're going to come and you're going to eat with the hands wet, and therefore it's not going to make it unappetizing, or if it's going to be that it's going to make it tameh. He says as long as the result that the hands are dry, you could eat the bread. What do I care? Meaning, I don't care the reason. At the end of the day, right now, the hands are dry? Yes, that's it. That's all that I need to know. So there's room for debate on according to this ruling of the levush. It might be that allowing the hands to dry by themselves is not effective since the water might be considered tameh, right, was not wiped away. Nevertheless, there's a basis to say that when someone uses a hand drying machine, it's even better than simply just allowing the hands to dry. Wow. Why? Because he does perform an act of drying the hands. And this is the reasoning offered by the response in Beru. Most Arachlim, however, agreed that even according to the Levush, it makes no difference how you're going to dry the hands. There's no problem whatsoever. Okay, what about wiping the hands dry before performing Netillat Yadayim? So okay, this is Lamed Gimel. The last halacha. Lo yinagev yadayim b'chaluko. A person should not come and dry his hands on clothing. Why? It's very difficult for remembering, right? I know people that they forget everything. What do they forget? Because they come and they are going to dry their hands, right, on their clothing. So therefore he says, so even on other clothing, meaning not only just his chaluk that he has on, any clothing. So a person shouldn't use clothing whatsoever. He should always do it right on something else because, right, that's what he says over here. It's permissible to wipe one's hands to dry on one's clothes, right? He says this will not affect one's. One second, hold on 1 second. 29. Wiping hands dry before performing Netillat Yadayim. Yekut Yosef states that the practice of many people to wipe their hands on their clothes to make them completely dry before Netillat Yadayim is acceptable. It does not affect the memory adversely. He bases this ruling on several arguments. First, it might be that the problem it might be that the problem of this behavior harming one's memory applies only when wiping hands on one's jacket and not on other garments. Interesting. He wants to say maybe it's only on the jacket and not on any other beged, meaning that it's not on him. The Pri Megadim wrote.
Sometimes I'm looking in my pockets for a napkin or something, and I don't find a napkin, but putting my hand in my
you have to be careful. Yeah, you have to be careful. The Pri Megadim wrote that he remained undecided. No, it's the same thing. No, because it's on the clothing. It's on the clothing. The Pri Megadim wrote that he remained undecided on the issue. Furthermore, the Nefesh Shachaya, Margaliot suggested that this applies only to someone who dries his hands after performing Netilat Yadayim, since the water in his hands might be tameh. There might be nothing wrong with wiping wet hands on garments at other times, and especially in the case that we're dealing with only a few drops of water. Yalkut Yosef supported this argument, explaining that since this rule appears only in the rules of Netilat Yadayim and not elsewhere, it probably applies only to drying the hands after Netilat Yadayim. Meaning he wants to say if it's not Netilat Yadayim, stam, the person has wet hands, and now he does it, it could be maybe there's no problem. Right? The Petach David, however, ruled that a person must take care never to dry on any of his garments, no matter why his hands are wet at the time. Therefore, it seems that it is proper to refrain from any leniency in this matter. At the end of the day, we're talking about your memory, right? People don't like to play with memory, right? So therefore, nowadays they come and they do all the, Of course, it's Kabbalah. All those things are Kabbalah. The Gemara Masechet Oyerot, the person comes, he starts eating olives. They're eating this. I come and I eat an olive, and all of a sudden now I forget my learning, or I take off the shirt backwards, I put on this or that, or all these different things. Obviously, this is all different things which are affecting the memory of a human being. It's certain. Obviously, it's more Kabbalistic in Yanin than just stam like that. But again, it's brought down because since we have an Averah to forget our learning, because it says Ishamer, right? You have to be careful, right? So if we have an Averah to come and to forget our learning, so we cannot do anything which is actively going to come and forget our learning, right? It's only no. If the Gemara says you forget your learning, right? A person eats a liver of a bema, right? The heart of an animal, or all these things, right? Or all these. So if it's going to make a person forget, that's it. You have an Averah. There's a whole question about women. There's an entire sefer, by the way, called Shmirat HaGuf VaNefesh. And in the sefer Shmirat HaGuf VaNefesh, it's on all the things about keeping your body, whether it's going to be, watching over health and everything. And one of the main concepts of the sefer also is what? Is Kashel Shikha. All the things that make you forget your learning, how do you get out of it, how do you do this, how do you do that, like all these different things. Again, it's the same halachot as we just mentioned here. What about somebody else's garment, right? But it's not your garment, it's somebody else's garment. So the Sefer Shmurat, I just brought it down. Shmirat HaGuf VaNefesh, he pondered whether this rule applies also to somebody else's clothing or not, right? And he did not come to any conclusion. right?
A tablecloth.
The same question. Same question.
What?
There was a question, and I remember, by the way, that you should know that there was once a thief in Bet Midrash, and the way that they caught him is that he dried his hands on somebody else's jacket. Now, why? Because if he was able to come and use somebody else's jacket in order to dry his hands without permission, it means that he's not careful with somebody else's property, and therefore, obviously, he was a thief, and they caught him. And then what happened was he actually admitted to it, and he was correct, right? So that means to come. Obviously, here we're talking about, it means that because many times the Chachamim used to use what people used to do, and right away they would say, you know what, this is the shorish, this is the root. You understand? And I just saw it. You understand? So it's very, very important. Now, a garment that no one is wearing. So the response of Rav Ephraim pondered whether it's all right to wipe one's hand on a garment that is not being worn at this time. It might be that this rule applies only to garments being worn. He did not come to a definite conclusion as well. In light of this, again, it's certainly recommended to refrain. Again, what we're trying to do is we want to refrain from anything that's going to make you forget your learning. So therefore, these are all doubts. We don't know. But if you've got a doubt, why am I going to take the chance? You understand? A person wouldn't take a chance. Nowadays, they come and they take pills. They do this for memories. They play, I don't remember what, there's a certain game that if you play this thing, it's going to help your memory. What is it? Sudoku. All these things that, like, so why would a person come and, he's going to start investing so much? This is so simple. Just be careful in what Chachamim come and they actually tell you. You understand? So it's very